Can't see both shoulders. Hey everybody, it's Bernard and David, and we are back for another Alabama Work Comp today. It's a show that we created a few months ago. We're trying to come to you live about every 4 weeks, and this will be, I think, our third show. Let's see, we've got to line us up just a little bit better. There we go. We're not in sunny California like we were a month ago, but good old conference room will have to do for us. How you doing today, Dave?
Doing all right. Busy, lots of meetings, but glad we're settling in to do this show for a little while.
Me too. And if you guys have any comments or questions, just throw them in there. We're going to chat here for about 30 minutes or so and just share with you some news from around the country, as well as some Alabama news, Alabama cases, case law, and those kind of things. And if you miss any of these episodes live, if you want to watch them at any other time, they're on our YouTube channel, Nomberg Law Firms, where you're watching it here now. And we sure appreciate any feedback, any comments. In the future, we may have other guests, but for today, you've just got the two of us, and we're going to get started. We look in the news every day at things that are going on from a legal standpoint that may impact our practice. And this is one that has certainly been an issue for us for many, many years, and for people who get hurt on the job in Alabama, and that's dealing with mental injuries. And more commonly, what you've probably heard in the news quite a bit is dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Dave, what's your definition of PTSD? What does that mean to you in this context?
Sure. So what we're talking about when we say PTSD is a mental or psychological injury that a person sustains. And what we're talking about today, of course, is in the context of an on-the-job accident.
And unfortunately, our state does not recognize what are called mental injuries, meaning if there's not a physical injury that accompanies the mental injury, then under our current Alabama Work Comp Act and the laws and the cases that are interpreting those laws, you can't recover. And it's been a long-standing problem for not only first responders like firemen, police officers, and the like, but for any person. I mean, I can think of several types of cases where we've had people working in a jewelry store or a pawn shop and it gets held up by an armed robber. David, I'm sure you can think of other situations, but there has to be the component of the physical injury to go with it to be recoverable.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what's known as a mental claim. Mm-hmm. And so imagine a first responder, someone in law enforcement, paramedics, someone that works for the fire department, mm-hmm. and they go to the scene of a crime or scene of an accident, mm-hmm. and they are trying to, and say someone's very, very grotesquely injured, possibly close to death at the scene of an accident, and paramedics, law enforcement, they're doing everything they can to keep that person alive. But unfortunately, because their injuries are so bad, they die at the scene. And so these law enforcement and paramedics, firefighters, they are witnessing death frequently while doing their jobs. And sometimes they may even know the person whose life they're trying to save. And so as a result, many states, and I believe it is 36 out of 50 states, have PTSD or they have work comp insurance, mm-hmm. for first responders when they only have a mental injury, meaning the injured worker did not sustain a physical injury as a result, but just a mental injury, something like depression, PTSD, or a psychological, mm-hmm. injury. So 36 out of the 50 states have those protections for first responders. Alabama,
unfortunately, we do not.
Alabama does not. I believe that several of the southern states that are contiguous to Alabama do, including Florida.
Florida does.
And Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And even Tennessee has coverage for mental claims for first responders.
Now let's differentiate that. Let's take it out of the context, David, in Alabama, where it's not a first responder, but it's somebody like I was describing working in a jewelry store that got held up, or they were witnessing a horrific crime that was occurring.
Yeah.
Again, Alabama doesn't accept that as an acceptable workers' compensation claim, meaning there's no coverage for that if there's no corresponding physical injury.
Right. It's got to be a physical injury in order for the person to receive work comp coverage for the mental injury or the psychological injury.
And I think there's probably about the same amount of states in the country, maybe within a few, probably 30 to 35, that currently do have coverage for that, for what is just purely a mental injury. And hopefully in due time, if the Alabama laws in our state get revised and updated, that might be a component part that where there would be coverage. It certainly seems to be the trend, but right now it's just not that. And I know you've had a prior case or two that's dealt with that issue.
Yeah, we had, I represented a underground coal miner, and he was involved in a very serious accident underground, and his foot was crushed by one of the mining carts. It was literally run over in his foot because of the pressure. It literally exploded, resulting in many surgeries to his foot. And he suffered from a mental injury as a result of that very serious accident to his foot. And so we got him some medical care from a licensed psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And we took the deposition of that doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor was military, and he served in war zones. And he testified that the injury to my client's foot looked like something that would have occurred in a war zone. There was a war type injury. That's how serious it was. And fortunately, we got him treatment. He made a good recovery as you can in that serious situation.
Mm-hmm.
But also, he was able to get more money from his claim because it wasn't just a foot injury, which is a scheduled injury in Alabama and it's only worth a certain amount of money. Because he had a mental injury, we were able to make that a body as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's worth more money to him, which he deserved and needed.
And that makes a very good point. Sometimes in Alabama cases, if the physical injury is just a minor injury, and I'm not belittling this man's foot injury by anything, but it could be a hand, a foot, a leg, which may be just considered scheduled and has a very limited recovery. If in certain circumstances the medical evidence lines up, then you can add the PTSD, the depression, the anxiety, whatever it may be, could change the whole outlook and value of a case like David was describing. And we deal with those kind of cases. We see it all the time. Here's another example. A client who we ultimately were not able to really make much of the case other than talking with them. They witnessed a horrific crash while on the job, I should say, but had no physical injury. But they witnessed really a terrible thing that occurred, and they had to put it on their private health insurance to cover it. But anyway, we can move on from that, and we're still staying in the national news, even though we hit some Alabama right there. We want to talk about it's an update we talked about in the last couple of months. It's the update of the Fair Pay for Play Act, and we're in the heart of football season. And sadly, in our part of the country, for those of us who follow Alabama football, and even if you don't, we all know about Tua's second major injury, this one being quite major, and has put him out for the rest of the season. Tua being Alabama's quarterback, for those of you who don't follow college football, and shame on you if you don't. But Tua has a very serious injury that required season-ending and probably collegiate ending surgery this week. It's to his pelvis and hip, and I'm not even going to get into the medical part of it. But the reason why we bring it up, he's one of the best quarterbacks in probably college football history, certainly Alabama football history, and he's got a potential career on the next level in the pros. Now, Dave, talk to us a little bit about how this this new California law that they're dealing with the NCAA may affect players like Tua.
Yes, we talked last month about a California law that was passed this past fall that won't go into effect for about 3 to 4 years.
2023, I think.
Yeah, but it would allow student athletes in California to receive compensation for use of their likeness. And we talked about that in great depth on our last show last month. So talking a little bit more about Tua, he is, or I guess before his injury, he was projected as a top 5 NFL draft pick. And now the talk is that because of this injury, he may fall in the draft from top 5 to the end of the first round. And I looked this up. There is a difference of possibly $25 million from being a top 5 pick to being a pick at the end of the first round, or possibly in the second round. And it is possible that he has draft insurance, which means if in the event of an injury, if his stock falls, so to speak, that it would pay for some of those millions of dollars.
And that's insurance his family would have to take out. It's kind of like a disability policy for professionals, if you will. But how does this affect someone of Tua's stature? This law's about, I know there's lots of debate about how can NCAA or collegiate athletes capitalize or make any money or profit at all on their likeness. And there's a huge difference between a star quarterback, a top well-known ball player who's projected to go into the pros and make millions, versus somebody who's 4th string, somebody who doesn't have the notoriety. Their jerseys aren't in the stadiums.
Yeah.
But I think what this does is just bring to light yet another reason, at least to me, why these athletes, I think, should figure out some way to compensate them in a fair and just manner while they're still amateurs.
That's right. He obviously, the quarterback at Alabama is potentially can receive a lot more money for his likeness than the 3rd string right guard. But it's devastating to see what happened. And I hope he has a very quick recovery, and hope he does get drafted early in the process, or early in the draft.
Yeah, and they've got 3 years to work out these kinks, and that's not a lot of time. That's less than 1,000 days to fix an issue that's been going on for decades. And there's not going to be any one specific set of laws, rules, and regulations that'll satisfy everybody. There never is. But hopefully, and there's a big article in the LA Times just today on this very issue, that hopefully fortunately at the expense of Tua's injury, it'll push it'll help clarify more of the issues.
And after California's law was passed, several states, I believe New York and even South Carolina here in the South, are looking at passing similar laws that will allow college athletes to receive compensation for use of their likeness.
The last thing that I read is there's 13 states right now that are considering it. And so we'll continue to talk about this and push the issue forward, and hopefully at some point some light will come up and they'll find something good about it. Let's move on, Dave. Let's see, where are we? We've talked in the past about the gig economy. We've talked in the past about those issues about reclassifying hundreds of thousands, if not millions, around the country in different parts of the world, potentially, from independent contractors to employees. And most notably, most of the press has been those gig economy employees, or workers, such as Lyft, such as Uber. Those are probably the 2 biggest names, but there's many others that are out there. Anybody who has part-time jobs. Well, again, California leading the way has created a new law that potentially will reclassify and give protections. And there's arguments on both sides. There are those people who don't want to be classified as employees because they don't want to have all those responsibilities. They don't want to have all of those regulations. They want to be free. That's why they took that type of a job. On the other hand, the argument, if you're an employee and you get hurt on the job, then you may have protections under work comp. You may have a whole host of other protections that 1099 workers, independent contractors.
Have benefits like unemployment compensation, work comp, possibly health insurance.
But here's where people get in trouble. And again, this was just in the news within this past week. In Connecticut, the Department of Labor hit 2 agricultural labor supply firms, I guess those are chicken processing plants, with more than $250,000 in fines for misclassifying dozens of workers as independent contractors to avoid taxes, workers' compensation costs, and the like. And to me, David, that just shows that these companies are pushing back. They don't think that the laws necessarily apply to them, but they sure got hit hard.
Yeah.
And this was in Connecticut just this week. It was announced.
Yeah. And similarly, big news out of New Jersey this month. New Jersey demanded that Uber pay $649 million for about 4 years worth of unpaid employment taxes for its drivers. The state of New Jersey said that Uber misclassified the workers as independent contractors when they should have been considered employees. This is of note on this situation. This is the first time that a local government has sought back payroll taxes from Uber, which has hundreds of thousands of drivers in the United States. Uber, of course, disputes the findings, and they're going to challenge the $649 million demand.
And we bring up Uber and Lyft because they're probably the 2 biggest companies in terms of sheer numbers of workers that they have in this, and that they have tried to fight it and will continue to fight it, I'm sure. You and I have talked about this on and off the show here, that from our perspective, people who drive for these companies and have these gig employee or gig jobs is what they're commonly called. You could be a courier for a local architect firm taking plans. You could be someone who delivers groceries around town. We have Shipped is based out of Birmingham, and there you see those folks all over the place, and they wear the green, I think it's green, Shipped shirts when they're in the grocery stores. And not to get too deep into those woods about what is and what is not an employee versus what is an independent contractor, I think that, and we're in the middle of doing interviews with people to get their opinions of these gig economy jobs. What do they like about being employees? What do they like about potentially becoming, what do they like about being independent contractors versus what do they fear or like about becoming employees? And the number one thing that I'm hearing from most of these folks is they'll have more protections. They'll have more protections if they get hurt or if they happen to cause an accident or cause somebody to be hurt.
I like the services that Uber and Lyft provide. I use both of them regularly. But as a work comp lawyer, I also want those drivers to have the protections of the workers' compensation acts of the particular state that they're driving in.
And additionally, if they come to us and they are workers, employees, we can help them. There's not a lot we can do except counsel them a little bit if they're independent contractors and explain to them the nuances of how the law works for both. But again, another topic in the national news that's not going away. When we've got more information to share in the upcoming months, I'm sure we'll address that. Let's shift a little bit. Let's shift away from the national issues. And I want to talk about from an Alabama standpoint. And we try to break up our sessions here into a couple of different segments. And we're going to move into the Alabama segment is what we call it. We're going to talk about a prior case that we handled in the office. It may or may not have had a significant monetary result. That's not the purpose here. But we want to talk about a certain nuance in the law that people may not be aware of or may be unfamiliar with about how it works in the context of Alabama workers' comp. And the case I'm going to talk about happened about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was a fellow who worked at a resort, worked in the laundry services area. Well, the long and the short of it is he was killed in the workplace. He was murdered by somebody in the workplace. It was not somebody who it was anticipated. It was a former coworker that this happened. Well, the uniqueness of this, and the reason why I bring it up, is that at the time, Alabama recognized common law marriage. For those of you who don't know, common law marriage is when two people hold themselves out and act as if they actually have gone through a ceremonial marriage, husband and wife. And there's many factors that help to define that. But Alabama repealed that law in January of 2017. So all of this predated that date. But at the time, the fellow who was killed on the job was in a common law marriage situation with his wife, a very, very nice young lady who had ended up being my client for this case, and had sadly, but ended up with on a more pleasant note, she was pregnant at the time the man was killed. The baby was subsequently born healthy, and I've checked on them about every 6 months to a year and check in, and the baby's, gosh, she's probably 4 to 5 by now. But anyway, at that time, the issue was not whether it was a compensable case. Dave, the issue was dependency. The issue was who has the right under Alabama law to receive any benefits that may be due. And I know you've handled those cases before.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about dependency. Talk a little bit about when we're talking in a death standpoint in work comp.
Yeah, usually we start with, was there a husband or wife? That's usually where we start, looking to see if the
a surviving spouse.
Yeah, was the worker married at the time of his death. And then we look to dependents, which are children, typically under the age of 18 in Alabama. But also a dependent it can be someone over the age of 18 if they are reliant upon the deceased, the worker who died in the accident, if they are reliant upon them for their financial support. So it can be someone over the age of 18. And that makes a big difference between whether it's one dependent or two or more dependents, because the benefits that the surviving spouse or dependents can receive increases if there's two or more dependents.
And so we always look to see if there are dependents as well as surviving spouses. But in our case, the insurance company disputed the validity of the marriage, the common law marriage. So we had to go to probate court and have a judge declare that this common law marriage was in fact what they held it out to be, what the wife, the surviving spouse, held it out to be. So we had to have a hearing in court to prove that there was common law marriage, which the judge found that there was. We then took that order and used it in the work comp case. And had we not been able to prove that there was common law marriage, and I forgot the part about paternity, we had to prove that as well. Had there been no paternity, had there been no common law marriage, there would have been no recoverable compensation here, because there would have been no dependents. There was no other family, and that's another fact that I didn't put in there. There's no other family in the state or that we could find, because the family was from, I can't remember the country, but I think it was in Central America. So anyway, that's really now let's come forward. The law currently, the law does not recognize common law marriage in Alabama. So what do you do in that situation? Well, we may have been in the same situation had we not been able to prove common law marriage or dependency at that time. There would have been no recovery.
Yeah, we need marriage certificates now to prove marriage, and then of course proving the birth or
paternity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, that was just that's a case we've handled in the past. There's summarizing it down into like 4 to 6 minutes really doesn't do the case much justice, but we wanted to share with you a little bit about how Alabama law in work comp standpoint also can be affected by other laws. And there's many, many, many examples, and we've used other ones in the past, and we'll continue to share with you some of the more unique situations and cases that we've had. Can you think of any other cases along this lines that we've dealt with, that we've had to either prove paternity, prove common law, or actual marriage?
Yeah, no, just use of a marriage certificate and a birth certificate is what unfortunately we've had those in recent cases where our client died while working, and that made things a lot easier as far as proving our case.
Now, guys, we're trying to do these every every 4 weeks or so. We're coming to you this week because Thanksgiving's next week, of course, and we hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. Next month will also be a week early. We're going to be on the 19th, given that Christmas break and Christmas holidays is the fourth week of the month. And then in January, we'll get back to our usual end of the last week of the month schedule. We're always open for suggestions of topics to cover, whether it's through this program or in any, because as you know, if you follow any of our social, we have videos all the time, live as well as pre-recorded. We welcome any comments. We're going to be bringing on some guests, probably work comp practitioners from different parts of the country. We're blessed to have friends in different areas, so we may bring on some from time to time to kind of contrast Alabama law, get some perspective from a different part of the country on national issues, so you're not just listening to the two of us ramble on about what goes on in our firm. But another thing that goes on in our firm is I'm going to let David talk to you a little bit about our quarterly newsletter. That another one's coming out not too long from now.
Yeah. So if you're a subscriber, you would have received your fall 2019 newsletter from the firm, where we highlight some of the things going on in the firm and with our employees, like Hannah welcoming a baby this year. We talk a little bit about Social Security. That's a part of Bernard's practice that keeps him busy. And then some things going on as well with some new hires, some things we did over the summer, as well as some cases that we're working on. We'll probably put out another newsletter beginning of the year.
And we also send them out. We have a monthly email blast that sends out what we've done the previous month. It highlights our the social media, any videos you may have missed. We also have we do this in email form as well. So if you don't want paper, just send us a note and we'll send it to you by way of email. We're heading into Thanksgiving. It's turkey all the way. Any last things you want to hit on?
Yeah, I'll tell something that we did this week. Me and Hannah and Alexis went to the Vine Church on Tuesday, where we help out once a month with their monthly food distribution for those in need. And we did something a little bit different and special this month, in that we helped give away 40 turkeys right before Thanksgiving for those people in need. So that was a lot of fun. It was a special time for us to get to do that. And we enjoy working with the church. And it just made us feel really good to help those people who may not be able to afford a turkey. And so I was proud of our law firm and our staff for helping with that. And then also today you did some.
Talk about what we have challenged our lawyer friends and firms around the country as well as locally. We call it the Cold Weather Challenge. And we put on social media with a hashtag Cold Weather Challenge. And what it is it's a way of giving back to your community locally at this time of the year. This time of the year, it's cold, even in Alabama. People need warm clothing. They need blankets. They need anything that'll help cover them up. So what we have done, in addition to this challenge online, but what we did do is 2 different places here in town, Emily and I and Alexis and I today, took half of our blankets that we had bought, hats, scarves, gloves, socks, and I think that's all. And we took them to 2 different nonprofits here in town that service a clientele that needs these things, including the homeless that desperately need them when the temperatures start to drop. So we've done that the last couple of years. We extend anybody who's watching this that wants to accept the challenge, just tag us on social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, Nomberg Law Firm, and put in there hashtag Cold Weather Challenge. Send us some pictures of you doing that community-based marketing and need, not just marketing, but it's a good deed to do. But we look forward to getting in the pictures. They've already started rolling in this week, and we hope you guys will step up and accept it as well.
Yeah, we'll post some pictures today. And I saw this week where Chapel, Smith, and Arden, our friends in South Carolina, accepted the Cold Weather Challenge and made donations this week. And Larry King here in Birmingham, his firm, he told me today that they've already purchased some items and they're going to give them away next month. So,
well, very good.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that'll conclude us for this month's episode of Alabama Work Comp Today. For those of you who watch us live, thank you. For those of you who watch us on a replay, we certainly appreciate the support. Reach out to us anytime. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and we will catch you next month. Take care.